When Vanessa leaned close enough for me to catch the citrus on her breath, she didn't whisper condolence. "I'll see you out on the curb with a suitcase," she said, lips barely moving. The bailiff was calling recess. Benches scraped. The room loosened. I didn't blink. I raised my phone so she could see her reflection and said for the judge as much as for her, "Your Honor, I have a recording I intend to offer." "Mrs. Hart," Judge Larkin replied, one silver brow arched, "we'll take up new exhibits after the break. Please be seated. My name is Evelyn Hart. Eve to anyone who's known me longer than a week. I was 68 the winter my son died, and until 8 months before this hearing, I thought I knew the woman he married. I knew her favorite vintner, her habit of arranging cutlery for photographs, the way she apologized without ever saying she was sorry. I didn't know who she was when no one was watching. 3 days earlier, I sat where I'm sitting now, while Vanessa's attorney, Ms. Reeves, told a tidy story I was a calculating mother who preyed on a vulnerable son and steered him into changing his will. 12 jurors watched my face like it might confess. Vanessa folded a tissue into a square and tapped the corners of her eyes. "The signature is suspect," Ms. Reeves said, letting suspect ring. Mrs. Hart had motive and access. She visited every Sunday. She discussed finances, persuasive, incorrect. Age brings a quiet instrument, call it weather sense for character. Months before the accident, something in me started humming when Vanessa spoke about money the way people speak about errands. She doesn't argue. She assumes consent and moves on. This hearing exists to decide whether Vanessa's challenge to Aaron's will moves forward. She must persuade the court that I bent my son's choices to my will, that he was impaired when he revised his estate plan 6 weeks before he left the house and didn't return. She does not know I have something she never imagined, a look at the self she saves for the dark. When the lawsuit first arrived, pages thick as a catalog, I stacked it by the kettle and let the steam blur the edges. Grief softens bone. For a breath or two I thought, let her have the deed and the accounts. None of it could restore the shape of my days. The call that split those days came at 2:19 a.m. in March. I was awake, taking inventory of small aches and debating whether the heat behind my breastbone was tomato soup or trouble. "Mrs. Hart," a man asked, voice steady with practiced sympathy. "Trooper Connolly, State Police. I'm calling about your son, Aaron. He said there'd been a collision at Pine and Old Ferry, a box truck that failed to yield that death was immediate." The words fit together, meaning refused. Vanessa reached the hospital first. In the family room's bad light, she stood so fast the plastic chair skittered. Mascara cut clean tracks down her cheeks. She held Aaron's ring in her palm as if gold could anchor a person. "Eve," she said against my shoulder. For a minute, we were only two women who loved the same man. The memorial revealed the rest. Aaron would have preferred hymns everyone knew and sheet cake at a church hall. Vanessa hired a quartet and toured casket showrooms like galleries. He built a life worthy of a proper goodbye, she said, signing checks that could have bought a used car. I let it pass. The size of grief dwarfs arguments about scale. 2 weeks later, we met at Mr. Patel's office. Vanessa arrived with a glossy tote and the expectation of automatic inheritance. When Mr. Patel read the will, surprise stripped her face bare. "I devised the residence at 12 Sparrow Lane to my mother, Evelyn Hart." He read even as a metronome and direct that my life insurance and retirement accounts be divided equally between my wife, Vanessa Quinn, and my mother. Vanessa blinked, then smiled thinly. "Aaron and I discussed something different," she said. Silence sat with us like a third witness. 3 months after the memorial, a courier handed me a packet on my porch while I clipped the zinnias Aaron planted last spring. Undue influence, lack of capacity, fraudulent procurement. The words marched like soldiers across the pages. Vanessa's team said Aaron's new type 2 diagnosis made him suggestible, that I used Sunday dinners to press him toward irrational generosity. They produced bank statements and text fragments with the gravity of revelations. My lawyer, Harold Pierce, 72 and unhurried, slid his glasses down his nose and explained the odds. "This is civil court," he said. "They don't need proof beyond a reasonable doubt. They need to look slightly more likely. The timing 6 weeks before makes some judges suspicious." He wasn't scolding me. He was measuring the slope. The September deposition felt like theater with me miscast. Ms. Reeves asked how often I visited. "Every Sunday." Did we discuss their marriage? Sometimes. Did I ever suggest Vanessa married for lifestyle? I told the truth. I said money seemed to be the lane she merged into first. Honesty is correct and still dangerous. They smiled like fishermen. Help arrived from a boy I'd watched grow out of scabby knees. Noah Kim, my neighbor's 16-year-old grandson, is a horizon collector. He flies a drone over the marsh and films egrets lifting like scraps of cloud. The Tuesday after my deposition, he knocked baseball cap in hand. Ms. Hart, he said, voice deepened but newly, so I think you should see something. He was pale the way decent people are when they've brought trouble to a door. This morning I dressed it in the slate jacket Aaron liked, makes you look like you run the place. Ma and pinned my late husband's small flag to the lapel. The courthouse smelled of lemon cleaner and old paper, a blend that says rules last longer than people. Vanessa took her place at the plaintiff's table in sober charcoal hair, twisted into a chignon that declared restraint. Ms. Reeves's opening offered the court a mother I did not recognize, a strategist, a puppeteer, a jealous widow who couldn't let go. When Harold rose, he didn't charm, he counted. Aaron's diagnosis was controlled, his judgment was sound, his changes were deliberate. Mr. Hart revised his plan because new information altered his understanding of his marriage, Harold said. Vanessa shifted. Then the judge called a recess. Vanessa leaned in with perfume and threat. I raised my phone and asked to be heard. The bailiff opened the side door. Voices spilled into the hall. I sat. In the quiet that follows a decision already made, a tap sounded at my shoulder. Noah had chosen his moment. He held out his phone. The screen glowed. The clip on Noah's phone opened in a greenish wash, the kind of night vision color that makes everything feel colder. His drone had been angled high enough to see over the fence line and low enough to catch faces when they tipped toward porch light. The timestamp at the bottom right read 11:42 p.m., March 18th. The night before we stood by Aaron's casket. We watched from the quiet of the corridor outside the courtroom. The bailiff had disappeared through the swinging door. The echo of voices from the restrooms and vending machines swelled and thinned. Noah held the phone steady in both hands like it might fly away. There was the back deck of 12 Sparrow Lane, my son's house, then the house that now lived in the first paragraph of a lawsuit. The railing I'd nagged him to sand, the string lights Vanessa insisted on for ambience, and on the patio a woman whose shoulders I knew the way I know my own handwriting. She stood with her arms around a man in a dark overcoat, her face lifted. The length of the embrace told its own story. So did the way she pressed her cheek into his collarbone like a docked ship finding the bumper it wants. I wasn't spying, Noah said. The HOA made a whole rule about my flights, so I switched nights and keep it over my grandparents' property. The camera drifted when the wind gusted. I didn't even notice until I scrubbed through later. You did nothing wrong, I said. My voice came out level. Inside my chest, something stopped pretending to be a bruise and became a clean cut. Noah pointed to a sticker on the back window of the man's car parked crooked by the oak. A rectangular badge glimmered when the security light flared. Rook and Tower Insurance. He parks at the strip mall on Harbor, Noah added. Guy with the tidy beard. He's always carrying a messenger bag. You've seen him before. At the coffee place, he said. He orders a double espresso like it owes him money. Can you send me the original file, I asked? Not a screen recording, the raw video. I brought the card, he said, surprising me. He opened his palm to show a micro SD case. I also saved a cloud, and my mom printed the metadata page. She said you'd want chain of custody. She watches those true crime shows. Your mother is a wise woman. He gave a small flustered smile that made him 16 again. Should I tell anyone? Not yet, I said. Let me show it to Mr. Pierce. By the time the recess ended, I had the card, the printout and courtesy of a quick handwriting note slid to Harold, a plan that would not look like a plan. Vanessa brushed past us to return to counsel table, the citrus on her wrist, cutting through the courthouse lemon. She didn't look at me. She didn't look at Noah at all. We resumed with polish. Ms. Reeves stood at the lectern and arranged her tabs like a poker player sorting aces. Your Honor, she began this case as simple. A mother disliked her son's wife, and when a manageable diagnosis shook the household, she seized the chance to redirect an estate. Her voice was middle-register comfort, the sound of someone selling investments to cautious retirees. She laid out the calendar Sunday dinners, bank transfers, my name on a beneficiary form, never mind the dates. Vanessa dabbed at her eyes exactly once. An economy of grief. When it was Harold's turn, he didn't match her temperature, he lowered it. We agree this is simple, he said. The question is whether Mr. Hart was competent and deliberate when he changed his plan. We submit that he was both. He called Dr. Asha Mehta Aaron's endocrinologist, who wore a charcoal suit and a watch with a blue leather strap. She testified that Aaron's blood sugar had been stabilized within weeks, that he had never presented as depressed or cognitively impaired, that he joked about counting carbs the way he used to count bolts when he fixed his motorcycles. Ms. Reeves tried to escort Dr. Mehta into speculation, stressed the existential dread of mortality, the fog of new prescriptions, but Dr. Mehta didn't leave the sidewalk. I treat the pancreas, she said mildly, not the imagination. Next came Mr. Patel, the estate lawyer who confirmed the date 6 weeks before Aaron died, confirmed that Aaron came alone, confirmed that he asked that discussions remain confidential to avoid unnecessary distress. Patel's tone didn't change, but his hands moved more when he said the word distress, like the word had weight. Ms. Reeves objected to the implication that secrecy was virtue. It could as easily indicate pressure, she said. Or discretion, Judge Larkin replied, overruled. Harold did not look at me when he introduced the phone records. He held them like dry bread he planned to turn into something satisfying. Mrs. Hart, he asked, while I sat under oath, were you the account holder for the Hart family cellular plan until last September? Yes, I said. Aaron was practical. He liked the family discount. He had me authenticate the billing statements 2 years' worth, all but 1 month, boring as toast. Then he drew a thin line with dates and times. Beginning 8 months before the accident, did you observe a pattern of calls from Vanessa Quinn to a number registered to Rook and Tower Insurance? Yes. How frequent? Some days 7-8 times. Late nights, early mornings, lunch hours. Who owns that number? According to the carrier, look up Marcus Hale. Rook and Tower lists him as a senior claims consultant. Vanessa shifted. Her lawyer objected on relevance. Judge Larkin leaned forward. Counselor, if the defense intends to argue that Mr. Hart's estate changes were a response to new information about his marriage, this goes to motive and credibility. Overruled. The jurors pretended to look only at the screen where the call log was projected, but people always look at the most fragile person in the room. Vanessa became a magnet. She kept her eyes fixed on the table as if reading invisible type. Harold capped the phone records with a soft click of his pen. Nothing further from this witness, he said, and I was excused. I walked past Vanessa on my way back to the bench. Her perfume had warmed into something sweet and heavy, the kind of scent that hangs in curtains. Defense Judge Larkin said. Harold rose. We have one more exhibit to authenticate. He glanced at Noah, who straightened so suddenly his shoulders bumped the wooden panel behind him. We call Noah Kim. Noah looked as if he'd been asked to drive a stick shift in the first gear through downtown traffic. He took the oath with both hands visible and his mouth stubbornly set. Mr. Kim, Harold began. How old are you? 16. Do you fly a small unmanned aerial vehicle commonly called a drone? Yes, sir. On the evening of March 18th of this year, were you operating that drone over your grandparents' property adjacent to 12 Sparrow Lane? Yes. Did your drone capture video of the neighboring property? Yes. Did you intend to capture that property? No, sir. The wind pushed it. I corrected as soon as I noticed. Did you later review the footage? Yes. Did you save the raw video file and its metadata? Yes. To the card and to cloud. I brought the card. Ms. Reeves objected that chain of custody was a teenager's notion. Harold produced the printed metadata, the card, and an affidavit from Noah's mother documenting the transfer protocol she'd copied from a crime lab's public guide. Judge Larkin examined the packet for a long moment, then nodded to the bailiff. Let's see it. The room went dark at the edges as the monitor brightened. Noah's footage filled the screen. The grain and drift made it feel illicit without making it untrue. There was the deck, the string lights, the dark overcoat. The woman's face was turned enough to be a face you could recognize in a lineup because you'd seen it at brunches and birthdays, and the DMV renewal counter. The man's hand traced the inside of her elbow as if following a path it knew. Vanessa stood. That's not, she began. Sit down, Ms. Quinn, Judge Larkin said without raising her voice. Words like not are not arguments. The camera jittered when the wind bumped it. Then it settled, and the pair on the patio kissed the way people kiss when they are not careful with time. The timestamp in the corner ticked over to 11:44 p.m. Harold didn't narrate. He didn't need to. Every person in that room owned a clock. We all knew what the next afternoon had been. When the video ended, the hiss of the ventilation system announced itself, the only sound brave enough to break silence. The lights came back up to their courthouse brightness. No one looks good under them, and maybe that's the point. Ms. Reeves tried to pivot. Your Honor, she said, even if the court finds this relevant events after Mr. Hart's death cannot bear on whether his will was improperly influenced before. Harold's voice stayed mild. 2 points, Your Honor. 1, the timestamp is the night before the memorial, not after Mr. Hart's death was public. 2, the phone records show contact between Ms. Quinn and Mr. Hale, beginning months earlier and intensifying around the date of the estate changes. Objection to counsel testifying, Ms. Reeves snapped. Sustained as to characterization, Judge Larkin said. She turned to Harold. Do you have corroboration of the identity of the man in the video? Harold nodded. We do. A parking permit visible on the rear window matches permits issued by Rook and Tower. Insurance and in the man's face corresponds to the headshot on the company's website for Marcus Hale. More importantly, the phone records tie Ms. Quinn to Mr. Hale's number for 8 months. Admit the exhibit, Judge Larkin said. The jury will give it the weight it deserves. The afternoon stretched. The rest of Ms. Reeves's witnesses felt like rearguard action text messages from Vanessa to friends about feeling alone in a marriage, credit card receipts for pharmacy purchases. In the week after Aaron's diagnosis, a sympathetic coworker who swore Vanessa was trying. Sympathy is a solvent. It thins everything it touches. Harold used his cross to sand away gloss. When you say alone, you use him. He said to the coworker, "Do you mean Ms. Quinn told you she slept at a friend's house the week Mr. Hart revised his will?" The coworker didn't remember. People seldom do when remembering risks staining someone they like. We broke for a late lunch. I ate half of a turkey sandwich in Harold's conference room and drank water that tasted faintly of copper. He circled dates on a legal pad and underlined 6 weeks and 8 months and 11:42 p.m., as if he were solving for X and wanted the chalkboard to see. "You all right?" he asked. "I am more than all right," I said, and surprised myself by meaning it as something calm rather than triumphant. There is a steadiness that comes when the picture finally resolves, and you can stop squinting at pixels. Back in court, the jury's eyes had the bright fatigue of people nearing the end of a long drive. Judge Larkin returned with a folder I recognized by its tab. She marks everything with a black fountain pen that bleeds through to the margin. She invited closing questions on the admissibility of the video. Ms. Reeves argued hearsay with a vigor that made the word flex. It didn't flex enough. The ruling stood. Harold rose for what the docket called brief redirect and what felt like aligning planks before nails. He walked the jurors once more through the unromantic parts of a marriage, Bill's deductibles account, owners the choice to keep a family, phone plan because it saved $20 a month. He asked them to consider why a man like Aaron, methodical, allergic to theatrics, would revise documents only when he had a reason that satisfied his own internal metrics. He didn't say betrayal. He didn't say affair. He held up the chain and let each link accept its own weight. Vanessa sat very straight, hands folded so tightly her knuckles shone. A pale line had appeared at the corner of her mouth as if she'd been pressing it with a fingernail. Ms. Reeves touched her wrist once, an economy of comfort to match the earlier economy of grief. When Harold indicated he had nothing further, he gathered his exhibits with the slow care of a man who respects paper. The bailiff dimmed the lights again, not for footage this time, but to prepare the projector for a still image. A freeze frame of the call, log columns, date, time, duration. Numbers are unromantic until they march. No one spoke while the screen went dark and the lights lifted. The judge's gavel did not fall. It didn't need to. The room had reached its own pause, the kind that belongs to clocks, to calendars, to the way a name looks when you set it beside the wrong evidence and can no longer pretend it fits. I folded my hands in my lap, as my mother taught me when I was a girl, in a different courthouse waiting room, and breathed in the courthouse lemon and waited for the next question that required only an honest answer. The projector cycled to black, and the courtroom's ordinary light returned flattening color and kindness. Judge Larkin made a few notes, the nib of her fountain pen scratching like a cricket in tall grass. She looked up. "Counsel," she said, "we will proceed." Ms. Reeves rose with a stack of blue-tabbed pages and the posture of someone determined to reclaim ground. "Your Honor, the plaintiff calls Dr. Elise Bloom." A woman in her 40s took the stand. Sensible heels, navy dress, a scarf knotted once and not fussed with again. She swore in with steady eyes and a voice that belonged to someone who had learned how to let silence do half the work. "Dr. Bloom." Ms. Reeves began, "What is your specialty?" "Clinical psychology," she said. "I run a private practice focused on grief, life transitions, and couples in crisis." "Did you treat my client, Vanessa Quinn?" "Yes. We began weekly sessions about 4 months before Mr. Hart's death." "And what brought her to you?" "A sense of anticipatory grief," Dr. Bloom said. Her husband had been given a medical diagnosis that upended routines. She reported feeling alone, frightened, responsible for keeping everything moving. Ms. Reeves walked the jury through terms like adjustment disorder and maladaptive coping, offering the vocabulary of pain without asking anyone to touch it. "In your professional opinion," she asked, "did Ms. Quinn present as manipulative or calculating?" "No," Dr. Bloom said. "She presented as overwhelmed." Harold did not change expression. When it was his turn, he rose like a tide, coming in quiet, persistent, inevitable. "Dr. Bloom," he said, "therapy privileges protect content. I won't ask for specifics. I will ask about structure and timing." He took up a sheet. "You keep an appointment ledger." "I do." "You saw Ms. Quinn on Tuesdays at 5 and—" "Yes." "In the weeks following her first session, did you observe any change in her scheduling pattern?" "Extra sessions, calls between appointments." 2 extra sessions during the second month," Dr. Bloom said. "A few after-hours calls." Harold nodded and set the ledger beside a set of exhibits already admitted into evidence. "The court has Ms. Quinn's phone records before it. On the Tuesdays, Ms. Quinn saw you. Her call frequency to a number registered to Rook and Tower. Insurance increased after 6 p.m. Is there anything in your practice that would explain why a therapy session about grief would prompt repeated contact with an insurance consultant?" Ms. Reeves objected to speculation. Judge Larkin sustained. Harold adjusted. Without telling us what was said, he continued. "Did Ms. Quinn ever express concern to you that her husband was being secretive about finances?" Dr. Bloom hesitated the length of a breath. "Yes," she said. "And did Ms. Quinn report changing her own estate documents during your course of treatment?" "Yes." timing, Dr. Bloom consulted the ledger, approximately 6 weeks before Mr. Hart's death. Harold thanked her and returned to his table. He didn't push for color. He had the outlines he needed. Ms. Reeves called a coworker next, a woman who described Vanessa as trying to hold everything together. She offered lunches, shared tears and cars, the kind of corroboration that makes a person more human without making them more honest. Harold's cross was one question long. Did Ms. Quinn tell you she had contacted an insurance consultant about increasing her husband's life coverage? The coworker couldn't recall. Memory protects what it wants. When Ms. Reeves announced plaintiff rests, the room exhaled. I didn't realize I'd been holding my shoulders up like armor until they dropped and I felt their ache. Harold stood. Defense calls Marcus Hale. The man who took the stand looked like someone who had aged out of a certain kind of vanity without noticing. Trim beard overcoat folded neatly on the back of his chair. He swore in with a voice that wanted to be quieter than the microphone allowed. Mr. Hale? Hale. Harold began, what is your occupation? I work for Rook and Tower Insurance, he said, senior claims and policy consultant. Do you recognize the plaintiff, Ms. Quinn? A muscle jumped near his eye. Yeah. How did you meet her? She came to my office, he said. She asked about increasing her husband's life insurance coverage. Approximate date, October, the year before Mr. Hart died. Harold walked to the evidence cart and lifted a folder without looking at it, the way a chef reaches for a pan he's used 1,000 times. What was Mr. Hart's existing coverage then? 200,000, Hale said. And what increase did Ms. Quinn request? 800, he replied. She wanted to bring the total to 1 million. There was a pulse through the jury box, a shift of posture, not sound. Numbers occupy a different part of the mind than pictures, but both can make a person sit up. Did Ms. Quinn explain why she wanted the increase? She said their expenses had grown, Hale said. Mortgage, lifestyle, future family plans. Did Mr. Hart approve the increase? Initially, he said. He signed preliminary forms, but he came to my office about 6 weeks before the accident and asked to reverse it. Reverse it how? Restore the original amount and change the beneficiary percentages. To what? 50-50, Hale said, between Ms. Quinn and his mother. I felt the words land in the room like small stones knocking together, finding place in a riverbed. Even Vanessa's breathing sounded different for a moment, then resumed at steady pace the metronome she'd built for herself. Harold paced the distance of one table leaf. During your interactions with Ms. Quinn, did your relationship remain strictly professional? Hale ran a hand over the crease in his trousers. No. Describe the deviation. He swallowed. We started meeting outside the office. Coffee, later dinners, later more. Who initiated contact outside work? She did, Hale said. She talked about feeling invisible at home. She said Mr. Hart controlled the money and the schedule. Did you believe her? I wanted to, he said, and the words sounded less like an excuse than like an old lock admitting it had once turned for the wrong key. But Mr. Hart was polite when he came in. Direct, not controlling. After the video you showed, I'm not proud of any of it. Ms. Reeves stood for cross-examination with a softness sharpened at the edge. Mr. Hale, she said you admit you had an affair with a married woman. Yes. You now testify in a manner that protects you and injures her. I'm telling the truth, he said. Isn't it true you hope to benefit from Ms. Quinn's payout? No, he said flat. I make commissions. I don't get a widow's check. She tried another angle, professional embarrassment, the need to align with whatever story would save his job. Hale looked at the jurors instead of at her. There are emails, he said quietly. There are forms with dates. You can check them. Harold produced those internal emails confirming Aaron's request to roll back the increase. The timestamp on the beneficiary change. Hale's own calendar entry the afternoon. Aaron stopped by, note to self, client wants to reduce coverage. Seems upset but composed. Paper is less dramatic than video. It is also harder to unsee once you've read it. The judge excused Hale. He stepped down like a man walking off a dock he had helped build without measuring the water beneath. The rest of the afternoon slid by on the rails now set. Harold brought back Mr. Patel for a narrow point about signatures. He put Dr. Mehta on for 2 more questions about medication side effects. None relevant, she said, and admitted the HOA letter Noah's grandfather had sent to neighbors, reminding them of the drone guidelines to close the door on prowling arguments. When the clock above the clerk's desk moved past 4, Judge Larkin called us to a halt. We'll recess until morning, she said. Counsel, please be prepared to address the admissibility of any remaining exhibits at 9. The bailiff's all-rise lifted and set us down again. I gathered my bag and stepped into the corridor where air moved differently and strangers talked about lunch as if no one's life had been rearranged on a screen an hour earlier. We were almost to Harold's office when his phone vibrated. He glanced at the display, then turned into a side hall with a motion of his hand that meant come without drama. Pierce, he said into the receiver and listened, and then said, Of course. We'll wait. He ended the call and looked at me with a face I had not seen on him before, alert, solemn, almost young. The insurance company returned personal effects from the police inventory this afternoon, he said. They landed at my office just now. There's something in them you need to see. We walked the half block in weather that couldn't decide between sun and overcast. In Harold's conference room, a cardboard banker's box sat open on the table. Inside, Aaron's briefcase scuffed at the corners. A watch with a cracked strap. A leather key wallet I had given him on his first day at the shop. A handful of paper clips and 2 pens that had chewed caps. The ordinary debris of a life interrupted. Harold lifted the briefcase the way museum staff lift frames. He laid it down and opened the latches. I knew the interior before I saw it, the good pockets his father had admired, when they'd picked it out together, the hidden compartment with a snap. Harold pressed the snap. There was an envelope tucked flat beneath the lining, not hidden so much as stored with intention. The paper had the cheap smoothness of workplace stock. The front held my name in Aaron's handwriting print, not cursive, the way he wrote after years of filling out forms. Mom. Harold didn't offer to open it. He put it on the table and stepped back. My hands shook, but the motion was less tremor than recognition. I slid a fingernail under the flap and lifted it. Inside were 11 pages dated in the top right corner, 2 days before the morning Trooper Connolly had said my son's name into a phone at 2:19 a.m. I read standing because sitting felt like a kind of collapse. Aaron's voice came off the page the way certain songs find the muscle memory of your hands on a steering wheel, immediate, unarguable. He didn't write like a lawyer. He wrote like a man who liked to explain a repair problem part's order of operations. He described noticing small changes in the house, the way Vanessa's keys weren't where they used to live, the way her phone never died anymore because a new charger lived in her car. He traced a line from there to a suspicion he didn't want to a private investigator he hired. For 2 weeks he never mentioned to anyone. He outlined dates, the first meeting at Rook and Tower, the forms he initialed, and the feeling that pinballed around his ribs afterward. The conversation he had with himself about fairness and risk, and the responsibility a person has to the people who made him. He wrote that he had gone back to Hale and told him to undo the increase that he had walked to Mr. Patel's office, because if he didn't put his feet under a man who drew straight lines for a living, he might keep postponing things that needed doing. He wrote that he hadn't confronted Vanessa not because he was afraid of her, and not because he wanted to hurt me by keeping me out of his confidence, but because he didn't trust what a confrontation would turn into once money and pride joined the room. In the 4th page's margin, he drew a tiny box and labeled it House. He arrowed it to my name and wrote Secure Base. On the 6th page, he listed account names and underlined beneficiary change 50-50. On the 9th, he said he had thought about the Sunday dinners and decided there were enough kinds of love in the world that a man didn't have to pretend a bad kind was good to keep being a decent husband to the end of a marriage that had been more performance than partnership. The last page was short. He thanked me for teaching him to make a list before a trip. He said if the list made it into my hands, he had not found a better way to keep me safe than paper and paper would have to do. He wrote, I love you without flourish. I set the pages down in 2 stacks so the curve of the photocopier wouldn't warp them later. Harold had been still as a standing stone while I read. He reached into the briefcase again and found a smaller envelope unsealed. Inside was a receipt from Rook and Tower for the beneficiary modification, and a copy of the change form with Aaron's blocky signature and a timestamp that matched Mr. Patel's file, date down to the minute. In the corner of the receipt in pencil, Aaron had written done, and then below it, breathe. The room smelled faintly of ink and cardboard, and the lemon cleaner they used on the hall floors. I was surprised by the steadiness that arrived, not the sweeping relief of dramas, but the clean click of 2 parts finely seated. Some griefs are an ocean you learn to float in. Some are a ledger that balances only when you see the numbers with your own eyes. Harold slid a blank folder across the table. We placed the letter inside the way people place a small animal rescued from a road, careful, wholly present. He didn't say anything about strategy. He didn't need to. The paper in the folder wasn't a plan. It was a record of a man I knew making decisions the way he always had measured, unsentimental, anchored to what mattered. We locked the briefcase again. Harold phoned his assistant and asked for a scanned copy on archival settings. I stood at the window and watched a woman parallel park along the curb with the patience of someone teaching herself to be gentle. The day had leaned toward the evening without my consent. Streetlights clicked on in a chain. When the scans were done, Harold returned the original pages to the folder and closed the flap with the small, satisfying press of paper meeting paper. He walked me to the door, held it, and let it close behind us with the soft exhale of a building that had learned how to keep people's secrets until walls were called upon to be witnesses. I carried the folder against my ribs the way a person carries a photograph she is not ready to look at again, but cannot allow out of reach. Morning returned the courthouse to its clean lines and fluorescent honesty. Harold met me on the steps with a small nod toward the folder under my arm. We passed through security, the tray for metal belongings scraped forward, the bailiff stamped our hands with invisible ink. Inside, the air had that lemon and paper smell again, like a school that taught only rules. Judge Larkin took the bench on time. Counsel, she said, will take up remaining evidentiary matters. Her pen cap clicked once. Ms. Reeves rose first. Your Honor. She began the plaintiff moves to exclude the handwritten pages the defense previewed yesterday. Hearsay, lack of foundation, and given the stakes ripe for fabrication. Harold stood without theatrics. The defense seeks admission under the state of mind and testamentary intent exceptions, he said, and we will satisfy authentication through multiple witnesses and chain of custody documents. The judge gestured. Proceed. Harold called Mr. Patel back to the stand. The estate lawyer adjusted his tie like a man re-entering a familiar room. Harold placed one sheet from the folder before him, then another. Mr. Patel, do you recognize the handwriting? Patel leaned forward. Yes. Mr. Hart's printing block letters slightly forward slant. He signed numerous instruments in my presence. This is consistent. Did the dates on these pages correspond to any activity in your file? They do, Patel said. The letter is dated 2 days before Mr. Hart executed the codicil and beneficiary change. The time notation in the margin, 10:30 a.m., matches my appointment log. Ms. Reeves objected. A witness cannot bootstrap authenticity by reference to his own records. Harold lifted a second exhibit, the insurer's inventory log and transmittal letter. Then we'll unboot, he said. He called a representative from Rook and Tower's compliance office, who testified careful dry that the briefcase and contents had been in the company's possession after police release, that the sealed bag number on their intake matched the one on the trooper's property sheet, that the envelope marked Mom came from the interior compartment. Finally, Harold called a handwriting examiner, not the kind who claims to read character from curves, but the quiet technician who measures pressure and stroke order. She compared known exemplars' tax forms, DMV signatures, a page of notes Aaron once faxed to Patel with the letter's pages. The printing shows idiosyncratic features unlikely to be duplicated by a forger, she said. The capital A formed without a crossbar, the way he dots an I slightly forward of center. Multiple natural variations within a consistent pattern. In my opinion, the same hand wrote all of these. Judge Larkin turned the pen in her fingers and looked to Ms. Reeves. Ms. Reeves tried the obvious. You're paid by the defense. I am paid for my time, the examiner said. My conclusions don't change with the invoice. The judge took the letter herself, then not to interpret but to weigh. She set it down. Objection overruled, she said. Exhibit admitted under Rules 8033 and 80315. Her gaze shifted to Harold. How do you intend to present it? By reading, Harold said, and for a moment he looked like someone unwrapping a present, not for surprise but for what it already means. He didn't dramatize. He stood at the lectern and held the pages where he could see and the jury could not to conceal, but to keep the voice in the room singular. He read Aaron's plain sentences in a voice that respected their plainness. I noticed small things, Harold read, and the minimal article in the phrase, the charger in her car, said more than any adjective. He read the entry where Aaron described undoing the increase at Rook and Tower, and the note to self he'd written in the corner of a receipt done, and then under it, breathe. He read the line where Aaron labeled the house Secure Base and arrowed it to my name in a hand that always ran out of room at the right margin because he planned as he wrote and forgot space was finite. He did not read the last 3 sentences aloud. He let the record reflect they existed and offered the pages to the clerk. The judge nodded. Ms. Reeves rose for cross-examination, a new polish over old angles. Mrs. Hart, she said when Harold briefly recalled me, you understand you benefit if this letter is believed. I understand my son wrote it, I said. You could have written it yourself? That would require me to forge his blocky. As I said, and the jury's brief exhale told me the word blocky had landed with the weight of seeing his handwriting projected yesterday. I never learned. She tried a different tack. Isn't it true you disliked Ms. Quinn from the start? I disliked how quickly she turned people into math, I said. I liked my son. I wanted his math to include him. Harold didn't rehabilitate me. He didn't need to. He asked the judge to take judicial notice of the phone records, already in evidence the policy receipt, Patel's log. The chain now had enough links to hold. The rest played out with the steadiness of a metronome finally aligned to the piece. Ms. Reeves offered a last witness, a pastor who had met with Vanessa during the week of the memorial and spoke of sorrow in broad brushstrokes. Harold thanked him and asked one question. Did she tell you she had increased her husband's life insurance coverage by $800,000 the prior autumn? The pastor looked pained. No, he said. Closing arguments came without flourish. Ms. Reeves returned to a theme of mothers who cannot let go, and the phrase sat in the air too smooth to grip. Harold's close was narrower competency, intent, corroboration. Mr. Hart made decisions consistent with new information. He acted in sequence insurance will quiet transfer of a sentimental asset into safekeeping. He rested a hand on the lectern, not on me or the jurors or the letter, and let the room breathe without him. Judge Larkin excused the jury for the afternoon. When they returned near the end of the day, the clerk gathered the verdict form with the practiced efficiency of someone who has learned to treat the dramatic as routine. The foreperson's voice was even. In the matter of Quinn versus Hart, she read, "We find the will and beneficiary changes valid. We find no undue influence, no lack of capacity, and no fraudulent procurement." There was no applause. This wasn't that kind of room. Vanessa sat very still. Ms. Reeves touched her elbow. I exhaled without sound, as if I'd been underwater and just found the surface not by swimming, but by remembering which way light goes. The judge wasn't finished. As a separate matter, she said, "This court is referring the record to the county prosecutor for a review of potential insurance fraud and related offenses." She shifted her gaze toward the plaintiff's table, not unkindly, not kindly either. "Counsel will advise your client accordingly." The gavel fell, one practical sound, not a flourish. People stood because a bailiff told them to. Harold gathered the exhibits and the letters folder with the same careful motion he'd used yesterday, and we walked out into a hallway where footsteps made the sort of hollow music one associates with airports and hospitals, and other places where lives turn on paperwork. In Harold's office, we made copies on heavy stock and placed the original back into the envelope that said Mom. He handed me the briefcase. He wanted you to have more than the paper, he said. He wanted you to have the container. At home, Sparrow Lane met me with the smell of cardamom from a loaf I'd baked and forgotten to eat. The string lights were still coiled in a basket in the hall closet. I hadn't yet decided whether to hang them for myself or give them to a neighbor's porch where teenagers take prom photos. I set the briefcase on the dining table and opened the curtains. The elm threw its dapple over the grass the way it had the summer Aaron learned to ride a bike, and clipped the trunk with his pedal and then laughed because falling taught him balance. A week passed before I noticed I'd stopped glancing at the driveway around 11 at night. 2 weeks later, an envelope arrived with the prosecutor's seal and a request to deliver certified copies of the exhibits. Harold handled the logistics. I answered the door one afternoon to find Noah on the step, baseball cap in hand. Again, taller somehow. He asked if I wanted to see geese cutting a letter V across the marsh at sunrise. We watched the clip on my stoop with the sky doing its late-day wash, and I told him not everyone gets to know they were useful in the right story at the right time. "Your garden looks good," he said, pointing to the zinnias. "It looks like it remembers what to do," I said. "I'm learning from it." Vanessa's name moved from one docket to another. I read the words arraignment and discovery the way I read weather forecasts for cities I will never visit. Interested, detached, aware that other people must carry those umbrellas. I saw Marcus once across the lobby of the courthouse, clean-shaven, now coat over his arm, heading to a meeting with a lawyer who was not Ms. Reeves. He did not see me. That was fine. The house breathed differently once the fear left. I polished the banister with a cloth the way my mother taught me. It took the shine the way older wood does not. Glossy but honest. On Sunday evenings, I still laid 2 places out of habit, and then put 1 plate back with a steadiness that felt like respect rather than absence. I kept the chair by the window where Aaron liked to eat when the game was on. The cushion has his shape because cushions hold on longer than people. I slid the envelope back into the briefcase's hidden pocket. Not to hide it, to keep it where his hands had decided it should live. Some people build monuments. Aaron left paper and a house with a roof he maintained before storms. In the mornings when I open the back door to let air move through the rooms, the screen sings a small Hinge song and the lemon cleaner gives way to coffee and soil, and the day goes ahead exactly as days do when nobody is reorganizing them for you. When I walk the perimeter of the yard, I can see the places where summer and fall debate at the fence line. The mower's path is a neat stripe. The zinnias nod. A boy with a drone shoots a line of birds at dawn. Somewhere downtown, a judge's fountain pen scratches across a docket line, and a file moves from one shelf to another. On Sparrow Lane, there is the sound of a mailbox closing and the clean click of a latch that fits. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. I'll see you next time as we continue exploring more journeys and lessons together.